So first, I'm going to spend the beginning of my talk scaring you all to death about how stress is ruining your life, and then we'll move into how nutrition actually can help deal with all that. So I want to talk about unlocking optimal performance under stress. Like Michael said in my bio, I've been so fortunate throughout my career in nutrition that it's really been able to run the gamut of who I've been able to work with. And I think the interesting thing about stress is it's very relative and personal to the individual, because so much of stress is mental and perceived. And so if you're experiencing stress, it may not be the same as what someone else is doing and they're experiencing stress, but that stress is still real to you. So if we have these people are stressed, right? You might have a different stress, but it's okay. The strategies work both ways. Like I've applied these strategies to people that work in offices and to people who are professional athletes and everybody in between. And so just keep that in mind as we talk about this stuff. So one thing that's important to remember is that stress impacts our physiology and our behaviors. And oftentimes the behaviors that it impacts, they make us do worse behaviors, which can make the stress worse. So here are just some wonderful ways that stress can negatively impact your body, right? So it increases the time needed to heal, negatively impacts sleep behaviors, increases risk of cardiovascular disease, decreases your physical activity, so you don't want to get out and be more physically active. There's this great, it's old, like 1978 article from the New England Journal of Medicine showing how stress impacts prevalence of the common cold and the duration that you're going to have just a common cold. So basic stuff. Makes you hostile, impatient, irritable, frustrated, and it accelerates the aging process at the cellular level. All good things. You guys are happy that I got invited. So one of the things then is we have all this stress, right? So what do? We cope with stress in a variety of ways, right? So when we cope with stress, it's generally going to be eating foods that are less than ideal, right? And moving less. So those are kind of our two main coping mechanisms because those things feel good. Couch feels good. Donuts feel good initially, not, a long time, not afterwards. But these behaviors, coping with these behaviors, unfortunately, or coping with stress is unfortunately filled with unhealthy behaviors. So we have to kind of mitigate that process. So I want to talk about how exercise can actually help do that. And so before we start talking about exercise, we want to talk about how exercise actually has this positive effect on stress through this concept called hormesis. So hormesis is basically, we do like the non-science version, it's that which what kills us makes us stronger. It's also the idea that like a small dose of a poison, right, can strengthen your immune system. Think like vaccinations, right? A small dose primes your immune system. Too much, right? And you actually can get infected. So with exercise, it does the same thing. Exercise, and you can ignore all like the science words on here, but what exercise does is it stresses your body, but it stresses your body in a way that your body then becomes stronger afterwards. So here's the graphical representation of that. So if we look at this graph, right, so we have the effect, positive, negative, on the y-axis, and then we have the exercise load. So at a certain point, exercise is really good for you, but then it starts to become detrimental. All right, so this is an important concept as we move through this. Because stress impairs physical performance and recovery. So we think of this graph, and then we layer stress onto it, and it brings us to the greatest PowerPoint animation I've ever created. Stress actually does this, what I call a phase shift in that hormetic zone, in that green zone, to that. You don't know how long that took, right? So then we have this exercise dose, which used to be positive, right? And now is negative. So maybe it's the workout that you always do, and you're like, God, why can't I do this? I always do this workout, right? Because other things in your life have shifted this over, and your body's just not in a place to handle it. So what kind of stuff in this? This is life stress. This is perceived stress. And it modulates muscular function following strenuous activity. So 12-week training program, bench press, squats, all can decrease with these higher levels of stress in your life. Mental stress. So this is amazing. So mental stress impairs recovery from exercise for up to 96 hours after the exercise. Decreased energy, increased fatigue, increased soreness. Then you think of psychological stress. So cortisol is our stress hormone. Kind of the harder your workout is, the higher cortisol levels are going to be afterwards, right? And then they start to go back down as you recover. Psychological stress impairs that natural recovery of those stress hormones. The magic, and I'm biased because I've dedicated my life to this, is nutrition. So if we can use positive nutrition, we can actually move this curve back irrespective of the stress in our life. Okay, so that was all like the terrible stuff. So now we'll go 9 minutes on the good stuff. So the first thing, we have about 4 strategies I want to share with you. Hopefully one of them is going to be relevant to your life. If you get all 4, it's like nutritional Yahtzee. So first thing I want to do is we call it optimize the energy gap. This is the gap between the amount of calories that you're eating and the amount of calories that your body is burning. So this graph right here represents what's called the additive theory of total energy expenditure. So when I went to graduate school, this is what was taught. So we have total energy expenditure, so total calories that we're burning, and then we have amount of physical activity. The other, the light green, that's calorie burning just due to life. You know, your brain needs to function, you gotta get up, you gotta do all those sort of things. The darker green is physical activity, and so the idea here is the more physical activity you do, the more calories you're gonna burn. Maybe you've had a coach, you've been to preseason sports, some people show up out of shape. Favorite thing for like big out of shape coaches to say is, oh, it's okay, he'll run it off, right? So the coaches think we'll do 2 days, we'll run, we'll do all this stuff. And because they live on this additive theory of total energy expenditure. Unfortunately, this is actually how life works. And what's really cool about this is called the constrained theory of total energy expenditure. This is universal across all kinds of organisms in the world, from fruit flies to birds to humans, that we all function actually in this way. So this is the caveat here is this is if calories are kept constant, right? So what happens is physical activity can continue to increase, but our body then starts to downregulate other processes to conserve energy. Because one of the truisms about biology is we're all about survival. Like the body is trying to survive. And so it's knowing that, well, if I have to go run 25 miles, but I'm only getting this many calories, I need to figure out how to run those 25 miles, so I need to start downregulating other processes. And so this is what happens with most people. So the physical activity energy expenditure can be there, but we get this downregulation. And so that right there creates more stress in your life, and that is impairing your ability to properly recover. So here's how it actually works in real life. This was a study. This is the graph from men. They did a similar, in the study was also women, and women it was actually a little bit more pronounced. So what they did was they had these people go run 20 minutes. They added 20 minutes every week. So week 1, they did 20 minutes, week 2, 40 minutes, week 3, 60 minutes. So what you would expect, and they're keeping their calorie intake the same, is that they would just keep burning more and more calories. But what actually happens is over time, calories actually then, the calorie expenditure starts leveling off. This is that downregulation that I was telling you about. So you can see it here at this arrow, and you can see it up there at that arrow. There's this decoupling of the energy gap because people are no longer eating up to their energy expenditure. So what happens here, TEE is total energy expenditure. When our calorie intake, just the total amount of food we're eating, becomes so much less than our total energy expenditure, right? This is going to erode at the foundation of our physical conditioning because we can't recover and we can't fuel our activity right. And it's going to increase the need for further adaptations, which are going to further stress our system. So by under-eating and doing an insane amount of activity, we're actually creating significantly more stress, and we're not driving those outcomes. Like if we're doing this, if we want to get better shape, if we want to lose weight, whatever it is, we're not driving those outcomes like we think we are. Instead, we're driving ourselves into the ground. It's going to inhibit progress, and it's also going to further increase stress. So the hack here is to eat to your activity levels. And I see this like at all from NFL linemen to everybody. Don't eat up to their activity levels. It's like we're all afraid to eat now. But if you're eating good quality foods, you don't have to be afraid. You know, it's very hard to overeat on broccoli and flank steak and pistachios. It's very easy to overeat on stuffed crust pizza, right? It's just different. So the idea, I call this concept 3 squares, like 3 square meals seems antiquated, so I call it 3+. breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a snack. On days that you train, the snack could be a post-workout shake. On days, if you train a lot, maybe you have a snack and you have a post-workout shake. But if you're missing one of those meals, and I see this all the time with high school athletes, it's so hard to catch up. It's so hard to catch up. So physical activity and stress deplete key nutrients. So B6, B12, vitamin C, magnesium. Being stressed and also physical activity, these two things together, deplete these micronutrients, vitamins and minerals in our body. So what can we do there? At the most basic level, I have this concept, you move from barcodes to bags. So at the supermarket, you don't pick up things that you would then scan that have a barcode, but you pick up things that you then put in a bag, right? So it's more fresh produce, more fruits, more vegetables, that sort of stuff. The other more scientific version is use this concept called energy density. So if you flip it over and you look at a food label, you look at total calories and you look at the grams per serving. You never want the total calories to be more than twice the grams per serving. The magic number is like 1.25. Anything less than 1, eat all day long. And what that does is that's going to drive higher quality nutrition, but it's also going to allow you to eat a lot more food, like a larger volume of food. Because humans actually eat based on weight, not based on calories. So you're going to eat 2.5 to 4 pounds of food a day, depending on your body size. It's up to you to determine whether that 3 pounds of food is 2,000 calories or 8,000 calories. So we actually eat a lot on weight, and this has been shown to be proven with kids, adults, everybody. Okay, stress also promotes blood vessel dysfunction, and this is potentiated by increases in blood sugar. So if your blood sugar is all over the place, right, that's going to make this blood vessel dysfunction even worse. Your blood vessels are super important because when you exercise, your blood vessels get bigger. That's called vasodilation. So stress is going to impair that response. And your blood vessels are also very elastic. Unfortunately, over time, they get stiffer. So they can't respond to the body's needs from a blood flow perspective, blood pressure perspective, and stress makes this worse. So what we can do to help control blood sugar, but also use it to time carbohydrates, because carbohydrates, when you increase carbohydrates, that's going to cause your blood vessels to dilate. We need that at certain times, especially for recovery from exercise. So we prioritize starch, grain-based, these more carbohydrate-dense foods in the mornings and directly after exercise. The key here, I say, is you focus on fiber. Whole grains are really confusing because brown rice is a whole grain, but somehow Fruit Loops are too, right? So eating more whole grains isn't very helpful. So flip it over, look at the nutrition facts panel, and think fiber instead. Don't think of starch and grain carbohydrates as your main meal item, right? It's part of the whole plate. So you don't have a plate of pasta, just pasta with some sauce isn't a meal because you don't want the starch or the grain to be that whole main meal item. You want to eat carbohydrates versus drink them. Drinking carbohydrates, unless you're recovering from something very long and intense, is a fast way to eat too many calories. And also, if you're stressed, carbohydrates can increase serotonin, which is a feel-good hormone. So it'll make you feel a little better and help you deal with that stress. During periods of high volume training or high frequency training, you want to place a little bit greater emphasis on the post-exercise carbohydrates because your body's actually just primed to get those then. And if you're one of those fortunate people who has trouble eating enough calories, one, I wish I was you, and two, liquid carbohydrates at this point also really helps. Okay, this is the last one. Stress promotes increased muscle breakdown, right, via impaired muscle protein synthesis. So when we exercise, our bodies break down our muscle, right? It's only with the recovery that we build it back up. Muscle protein synthesis, the science version of muscle building, is basically what we're talking about. But when you're stressed, your body doesn't rebuild muscle like it should. So the breakdown stays the same. You don't build back up like you need to, so you end up at this net loss. And in certain situations, this could be 3x. Bad news too, the older you get, the worse it gets. Further bad news, 30 is considered old when we talk about muscle research, okay? Yeah, I know, yes, that's right, boo. Boo to whoever created us humans. It's ridiculous. All right, so this is what you do. So people generally eat this. There's this great protein researcher named Doug Patton-Jones. He called people the tea and toasters because they have tea and toast for breakfast, very small protein, a little bit more at lunch, and then a big dose of protein at dinner. So what happens is through some other research that I don't have time to share with you, they found that if you even out your protein intake, same amount of protein, just spread out throughout the day more evenly, 30 grams is kind of the key number, what you end up doing is you get this 25% increase in muscle protein synthesis. So 25% increase in muscle building over the course of that day. So you're eating the same amount of protein, it's just spaced out more evenly and more moderately throughout the day to get a bigger bang for your buck. Now, if you're training really hard or you're not getting enough calories and you need something, protein right before bed also helps. So this whole idea of your body doesn't digest and it doesn't sleep well, it's fine. You get 20, 40 grams of protein right before you go to bed. Could be whey, could be casein, could be a turkey sandwich, right? That's also going to increase muscle protein synthesis while you're sleeping. All right, so I'm a little bit over, but here are our 3 take-homes. People cope with stress in unhealthy ways. So we got to know that, and then how can we be proactive to make proactive steps towards being beneficial? Stress is going to negatively impact our conditioning. So we also need to think, if we're dealing with stress in one area of our life, maybe we can't go be an Ironman in the physical aspect of our life. We got to kind of balance the entire equation. And finally, if we're smart with our nutrition, it can be used to counteract and undo some of the negative effects that stress has on physical performance and recovery. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Have a great day.